and I think it's gonna be really easy. But I've been wrong about a lot of things today, so. Hello, welcome to Moonbelly Makes. My name is Katrina, and this series is called Katrina's Great British Baking Project, or Bake Along with Bake Off. This video has my first attempt at recreating one of the bakes from one of my favorite shows. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend checking it out. And I'm really excited to share it with you. If you are interested in knowing more about the hows and whys of this project, you can check out the post. I linked it in the description below. It has all of the details as well as which recipes I used to recreate this bake. The short version is that I am recreating bakes from the show for fun and to learn how to be a better baker. What better way than to bake along with Bake Off? This week's bake, which is the first one that I'm doing, FYI, comes to us from Collection 5, Episode 1, which is the oldest episode that I have access to here in the United States. I wanted to start with the first one that I ever saw, but I can't find it anywhere. So this is the signature bake, where the bakers were asked to make a family-sized fruity cake. They were not supposed to use any dried fruit, it was just supposed to be fresh fruit. And I chose Stephen's Bonfire apple cake, which was a spiced apple cake with a toffee sauce on top, mascarpone filling in the middle with a little cinnamon, and then candied citrus rind on top, and these little mini toffee apples. So that's all I'm gonna say for now. Here's how it went. This bake had multiple components, so I started with the actual cake so it could cool while I did the more hands-on tasks, which was everything else. For the cake, I decided to use Honeycrisp apples. Honeycrisp is one of my favorite varieties because, as the name suggests, it is super sweet and flavorful, while also having a crisp and juicy texture that actually holds up quite well to baking. I almost never peel apples, but it felt like the right thing to do for this somewhat fancy cake. Not to worry though, I snacked on the peels throughout the day, so they did not go to waste. My brother hated apple peels when he was younger, and I always ate what our mom peeled off, so this was adorably and unexpectedly nostalgic. You did not come here to be impressed by my knife skills, so breezing past that, I popped my chopped apples into a bowl and added some cinnamon and light brown sugar. I gave it a quick mix and set it aside while I got the pans ready. Stephen's cake was 2-layer, so that's what I am doing. I prep the pans by lightly oiling with neutral oil and then dusting with flour. After tapping out the excess flour, I cut parchment rounds by folding the paper into a skinny triangle and then cutting the edge. This doesn't have to be perfectly sized, but it should be close-ish. I think a bit too small is better than a bit too big. I added a bit more oil on top and the pans were ready to go. Dry ingredients were next, so I mixed together some all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, and more cinnamon, and also some nutmeg that I freshly grated off camera. I got surprised by my jangly new whisk and set the dry stuff to the side. The wet ingredients were neutral oil, I used avocado, white sugar, and light brown sugar. After mixing those until they became a bit pale, I added in 1, 2, 3 eggs and some vanilla. Then it was time to carefully add the dry ingredients, attempting to get at least 50% of the mixture into the bowl and not on the counter. I turned the mixer quite low and added the dry stuff in a few additions to make sure it was fully incorporated. After the last addition, I switched to my spatula to gently mix the remaining dry bits in. Then I dumped the apples in and gently stirred until it looked like they were evenly spread out throughout the batter. I weighed the batter into the pans to make sure that they each had exactly half of the goop, and into the oven they went. Okay, the cakes are in the oven. I'm very excited. They already smell amazing. Even the batter just smelled so good because the nutmeg and the cinnamon, it just smells amazing already. Feels like fall. And so I don't know what I'm gonna do next. I think I might turn my attention now to the toffee sauce, just because that seems like the medium hard of the next 3 things that I have to do. I think the toffee apples are scaring me a little bit, and the frosting just sounds really easy, so I'm gonna do the toffee sauce.
Toffee sauce is fun because these ingredients are all amazing. How can you go wrong with brown sugar, heavy cream, butter, vanilla, and salt? Spoiler alert, you can. I will tell you about that later. Anyway, I brought all of the ingredients to a gentle boil except for the vanilla. And then once it had thickened a bit, I took it off the heat and added the vanilla.
I just burned my finger on the toffee sauce tasting it, but totally worth it. It is so good. So even if the cakes are terrible, even if the cakes totally suck, at least I made one good thing today.
And that was a bit of a premonition because even though I checked the cakes early,
well, I think I overcooked them. I didn't even put them in for the full time. My oven's not usually hot, so I don't know what happened. They're not ruined, but they're a little dark.
Moving right along, I got the cakes out of the pans and cooling. Here are some very satisfying parchment peels for those of you who like that sort of thing. I then began the process of making the mini toffee apples, and here is where things really started to go downhill for me. Steven shaped the mini apples using a melon baller. I don't have one of those, so first I tried my tablespoon measure. Total fail. It basically made a hockey puck, and I wanted the little apples to be round and spherical, not flat. The next option was to just carve them out with my sharpest small knife, which ended up being still quite lumpy, but I decided it was good enough. This worked a bit better, so I carved an indeterminate number of lumps and stuck a third of a skewer into each one. I wanted to make the landing setup before I got the caramel coating cooking, so I got a wire rack and placed it on top of 2 equal height jars. Then I went looking for some clothespins to hang the skewers from. I thought I had regular ones, which I couldn't find, but I did find these tiny ones in my crafting stuff that were just so cute. The coating for the apples was supposed to be a crunchy toffee, not a sauce like I'd already made. For this, I mixed sugar, water, corn syrup, and a tiny amount of white vinegar. I tried to cook the toffee until hard crack stage, wiping down any sugar crystals that formed on the side of the pan with water. In theory, once the toffee was the proper color and temperature, I should have been able to dip the apples in the coating and hang them from the wire rack. The apple would be coated in a caramelly, thin, shiny coating that would form into an elegant drip of toffee, which, once cooled and hardened, could be turned upside down to look like a flame. This did not happen. I used a half recipe, so there wasn't enough liquid in the pan for my new candy thermometer to get an accurate reading. I ended up absolutely torching the sugar. It was smoking way worse than is showing up on camera, but for some reason, maybe unbridled optimism, I forged ahead. On top of the caramel being totally burnt, because the apples are naturally wet without their peel, the coating wasn't really clinging to them. One literally fell right out of the coating and onto the plate.
That didn't work. It's fine. Either we'll have some like really tasty burnt sugar little toffee apples, or I made garbage. I'm gonna let them cool and we'll find out. I'm not doing that again. So if they didn't work, I'm just not gonna put them on. It's fine. This is a learning experience, right? Another apple fell out of its plastic. It's plastic. It does look like plastic. Oh my god. It tastes terrible.
In my anxiety and frustration the toffee apples, I had totally forgotten about the candied citrus rinds. I realized this is why the bakers write everything down and are always looking at their notes, because under stress, it is so easy to lose track of what's going on. I quickly looked up a few recipes and adjusted them to make sense for my needs. I cut the rinds off of a lemon and orange and boiled and drained them 2 times. Then I boiled them in a sugar and water simple syrup for about an hour, drained them a final time, and spread them out on a wire rack to cool. Once they were cool to the touch, I tossed them in some granulated sugar.
Ooh. Mm. The citrus peel worked. That's really tasty. So now it's frosting time, and I think it's going to be really easy. But I've been wrong about a lot of things today, so. The recipe that I found uses heavy cream, and Steven didn't say that he used heavy cream. He specifically just said mascarpone, cinnamon, and icing sugar, which is confectioner sugar or powdered sugar in the US. He didn't say he used any heavy cream or any milk, and I couldn't find any recipes that didn't have that, but he wasn't calling it mascarpone frosting. He was calling it whipped mascarpone. So I don't think I need to add butter. I don't think I need to add milk or cream, but I'm just going to do that without first because all the recipes say to add the cream at the end anyway. So I'm just going to start with sugar, cheese, and cinnamon, and if it tastes good, which it's going to, I'm just going to leave it like that. Last component. So good. I took a bit of a break. I had a meeting, I had some lunch, and I am back and refreshed. I'm going to reattempt the toffee covered apples. I'm not going to make them into little circles. I'm just going to do slices, and hopefully I will not burn the sugar this time. What am I going to do to make it better? I wish I had an even smaller little pot, but I don't. This is the smallest one that I have. I think really it's just going to involve using my instant read thermometer. I think that I just have to use it and not my new fancy candy thermometer. Boo! I think that the Thermopop is gonna save me on this one. I hope. This is take 2 of 2. I'm not going to try a third time. Famous last words. I'm not doing that again. Wish me luck, please.
I got the same sugar mixture I made before boiling again and brought it up to the proper temperature, but it was super light in color. I clearly don't know where the middle ground is here. I missed the toffee part. These are too light, but the temperature was right, so I pulled them. It's kind of cool. Here goes nothing. Nope, bad. This was very, very bad.
So here's the status report. Now all of the components are done. Some of them are done better than others. Speaking of that, because this has taken so long, my toffee sauce has broken. So I'm going to try to emulsify it again. And it has like a shiny layer of fat on top, and it is still tasty, but the texture is just totally wrong. So I'm gonna try and bring that together, and then I can try to assemble everything.
Assembly of this cake was very straightforward. I put down a tiny bit of frosting to hold the cake in place and put the first layer down. Then I scooped all of the mascarpone and spread it around with my biggest offset spatula. Top layer of cake next, and I guess I really wanted you to see how silky the toffee sauce was after I had fixed it. I spread it around to make sure that the drips were even, and then laid down some citrus rinds to look like, I don't know, like kindling, like embers. Then I put some candied apple slices in kind of the shape of a fire. Yeah, not really. But it was clearly amusing to me. I tucked a few more citrus rind pieces in to make it look kind of like flames, and then it was time to cut a slice. The apples were the perfect texture, studded throughout the cake. The mascarpone added a little tang to offset the sweetness of the rich toffee sauce, and the citrus rinds added a bitter note that I thought would be weird, but I actually really enjoyed. 10 out of 10 handshakes for the likelihood of making this again. 8 out of 10 for my execution of the bake, mostly because those candied apples were a total disaster. And just a side note, this cake got even better as it sat in the fridge for the few days it took us to work through it.
So I hope you enjoyed watching that process and following along for all of the highs and lows. And maybe you learned a little something from my mistakes. I know I definitely did. And if you have any tips for cooking sugar into caramels and candies, I am all ears. I thought it would go better than it did. But it's okay, I'm here to learn, and the cake still turned out amazing. I think the best thing about this, and it can't always be true, but for this one, even with all the little mistakes that I made, it still came out absolutely delicious, and we're finishing that cake. It's so good. I took all the apples off. I just put the apples on for the pictures, and they're gone. I binned them. All in all, I'm just very proud of myself for trying something new. I've also been thinking about this project for literally years, so I'm very excited that I actually am allowing myself the space to do it. So if you want more details, including all of the recipes that I used, that I found from different places on the internet, as well as some insight into my thought process, how I went about things, just in a little bit more detail than I was able to share in this video, then you can check out my website. Also housed there, if you're interested, are other kitchen projects, like some of my own recipes, some of my family recipes, and just things that I like to make in the kitchen that are completely separate from this bake-off project. But then I also do a bunch of DIY and like crafting projects, so all of that stuff is on the website too, so you can check it out. And of course, you can also find me on Instagram to stay connected. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!